We're still in chapter 6, and we're going to find percent of a number. Find percent of a number. And there's actually 3 ways of doing this, and we'll show all 3 ways. As I said before, there's 3 ways. And so what we'll do is we'll draw a line, 2 lines going down the paper. So we'll divide up into 3 parts. And our first way of doing it is using proportions. That's the word proportion. Then we have adding percent. So proportion, add percent. And the last method is multiplying decimals. Multiplying decimals. And our first problem is going to be find 60% of 48. And I'm putting that down 3 times. 60% of 48. 60% of 48. 60% of 48. Because we're going to show this 3 ways. Let's first work with the proportion. So, remember we have our proportion, we have a bar equals bar 100. And remember up here in the corner, this is your is, this is your of, this is the percent, and of course you have 100. And so we just plug in the correct numbers. 60%, well this is 60. The percent number goes right there. Of 48, well the 48 goes where the of number goes, down here. So what are we missing? This. We want to know is. What is 60% of 48? Now that we've done that, we'll isolate x, get x by itself. Let's see. The one diagonal of x goes on the very bottom. So that would be 100. And the other 2, these 2 here, go on top. 48 times 60. Okay, so that's setting up the problem. We will stop right there. But if you want to find percent of a number, this is how you would do it using proportions. Okay, let's go now to adding percent. How do we set up with adding percent? Well, 60%, that would be 50% and 10% together. And I would simply just add those, and that would add up to 60%. And if you remember, to find 50% is just half. So what is half of 48? Half of 48 is, half of 4 is 2. Excuse me, half of 8 is 4, 24. Next, let's find 10% of 48. To find 10% of 48, I move the decimal 1 space. So it's 4.8. Now remember, the decimal on the 24 is right there. So for 48, you move it over 1 space, now it's 4.8. Okay, so that's how we would set up using percentage, adding percentage. Now let's go to multiplying decimal. For multiplying with the decimal, 60% is the same thing as 0.60, right? You move the decimal 2 spaces. Of is the same thing as the word times. So this is the same thing as saying 0.60 times 48. 48 times 0.60. And then you would multiply. Okay, so this is the other method. Let's go ahead and multiply this out. Now there are shortcuts to multiplying it, but I'll just do it the long way. 0 times anything is 0. Put a space holder. 6 times 8 is 48. Carry the 4. 6 times 4 is 24. And 4 makes 28. Alright, so that is 28, 8, 0 I move the decimal over 2 spaces, so it's 28.8 or 28.80. Okay, let's do the same thing to the one to the side here, the adding percentage. If I do that, let's see, this is going to, I'll bring the decimal point straight down. That is 8. 4 and 4 is 8. And then we have a 2. So see, same answer. So same answer, 28.8, 28.80. And if we did this, what we'd have to do is we'd cancel some things and then we'd have to divide and long division. And we'd end up with the same answer. But we'll just stop right here. Okay, let's do another problem, again, using the same 3 methods. And this problem is 30% of 80. 30% of 80. 30% of 80. 30% of 80. So for the proportion, we first set up bar equals bar 100. And then remember that this is the is of percent 100. So let's see, we have 30%, that goes here, of 80, that's my of number, and so you don't know the x. So we have x equals, let's just set it up, the one diagonal goes at the bottom, and the other two go on top. And the order doesn't matter. Okay, we'll stop here. Let's go to the next one. So we set that up. Let's go to the next one. 30%, well, that would just be 10% 3 times, right? And you can multiply by 3 or you could just add them up. And that would be 30%. 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%, 3 times. That's 30%. So remember, to find 10% of a number, you just, again, here's a decimal. You move it over 1 space. So if I move it over 1 space, that is simply 8. 10% is 8. 10% is 8. Okay, so that's setting that up. Now let's go on to the next one. Okay, this time we are multiplying decimals. So remember, 30% is the same thing as moving the decimal over 0.30. Right? Because there's a decimal there, moved over 2 spaces, now it's a decimal. Of is the same thing as times, and then we have the number 80. So we have 0.30 times 80. And we set it up. And there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and calculate this since we're right here. Again, I'll do it the long ways. There are shorter ways, but so that's 0, 0, a space holder. 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 8 is 24. I add it up. I move the decimal over 2 spaces. Move the decimal over 2 spaces. 24.00, or just 24. Let's go next one to the left. 30% of 80 using adding it up. Well, 8, 8, and 8 is just 24. So, same answer, just a different method. Slide over to the other one. Proportion. Okay, this time we'll have to do some reducing. So 10 goes in here. Well, let's do 20s. Some people like to use 10 and 10, and so they'll cross off the zeros. I like to use 20. 20 goes in here 5 times, and 20 goes in here 4 times. And then 5 will go into 30. 5 will go into here once, and 5 goes into 30 6 times. So you can see I have 4 times 6. 4 times 6 is 24. So the answer is 24%. Not percent. What am I saying? I'm not trying to find percent. I'm just trying to find the number. So 30% of 80 is 24. So now you can see the three ways of solving the same problem.